My name is Katie Yates, and this is the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife's podcast, Fishing Game Changers. The Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, or MDIFW, preserves, protects, and enhances the inland fisheries and wildlife resources of the state. Established in 1880 to protect big game populations, MDIFW has since evolved in scope to include protection and management of fish, non-game wildlife, and habitats, as well as restoration of endangered species. In addition to its conservation duties, MDIFW is responsible for enabling and promoting the safe enjoyment of Maine's outdoors, from whitewater rafting to boating, snowmobiling, hunting, fishing, and wildlife watching. Our current commissioner is the first woman nominated to lead our department. Before her appointment as commissioner, Judy Camuso had been the director of the Wildlife Division since 2013, and she has over 20 years of experience with MDIFW and the Maine Audubon. I had the opportunity to interview the commissioner sometime before work from home was the new normal. In this series, I am exploring the faces behind the camo. I'm talking with hunters of different backgrounds to hear their first-time experiences in the field. I'll be chatting with department staff, lifelong hunters, hunting mentors, and former vegetarians who didn't get into hunting until adulthood, like Judy. I've only been hunting once in my life, so I'll be learning too. If at this point you think, this podcast isn't for me, I'm not interested in hunting, I encourage you to keep listening. You could hear something inspiring or unexpected about the motivations for hunting and how people learn.
Well, I'm Judy Camuso, and I am Commissioner of Fish and Wildlife. I started off as a regional biologist down in Gray when I moved to the department. I worked for Maine Audubon for 11 years before I came over to the state. And I started as a regional biologist in Gray. You know, as a regional biologist, you work on like every species that's within the region. So everything from moose check stations to, looking at deer and reptile and amphibian stuff and managing plover projects and endangered species. So it's a really a wide range of programs that the regional staff manage. One of the things you have to do as a regional biologist is be ready if an animal needs to be relocated. They have to be able to operate the dart gun.
The dart gun is loaded with animal tranquilizer. This safely sedates an animal so it can be relocated if it's posing a danger to itself, people, or property. Judy did not come from a background where shooting guns or owning firearms was commonplace. Feeling a level of discomfort, she decided she would practice, with some help from the game wardens.
So I was really nervous that I wasn't going to be able to do that by myself. So I actually got a 22, which is a very similar style of gun to the dart gun, and I practiced with the 22 so that I would become a little more proficient should I ever need to use the dart gun. And the dart gun's a little bit different because it's got like cartridges and drugs and all these other mechanisms at play, but I still just wanted to get used to kind of shooting something.
Just the feel of it.
Yeah, just the feel of it, and the same as a bolt action, same as the dart gun. And I mean, the dart gun, we practice with that as well, but the 22 I could practice at home all the time consistently. So when I needed to use that, I was able to. When I needed to use the dart gun, I was able to. But
did you take a class? Is that how you got used to it, or did you just?
No, I had a couple game wardens help me.
Oh,
yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah. And I mean, one does have to be certified to use the dart gun, so you have to be certified in the drugs use and in administrating those drugs. But the actual operating the gun was what was intimidating to me, much more so than the drug mixture. Mm-hmm. And so I got used to that. But at any rate, that's way long roundabout way to say. Eventually,
no, but I think people can relate to
yeah, totally.
That is an intimidating piece
God,
of it.
yeah. And I was still just comfortable in the 22 that I had. Just you just put one bullet in at a time, so it was like easy, and it was just a bolt action. So there's not a lot of complicating components to the gun. The stuff, there's no magazine. Stuff doesn't have to come out, and so it's really simple to use.
Throughout Judy's work with the department, she began to meet and interact with hunters as she never had before. It's probably no surprise that those who work in the department are outdoorsy, and many of them enjoy hunting and fishing in their spare time. Judy, a wildlife biologist, understood the role of hunting in responsible management, but really had no idea where to start.
I did not grow up hunting, although I grew up outside most of the time. No one in my family and no one really that I ever knew hunted until I got to college. And eventually when I started working for the department, I was still the I was the only female in the regions, and I was the only person that I knew of in the department that didn't hunt. So it was kind of like always this big white elephant, like, I don't do this one thing that everybody else does. I was the only person, I think, in the office that did not hunt. And so then I moved to the Augusta office, and I was actually was at a meeting and talking about how difficult it is to get into hunting. And at that point, I was wildlife director. And I said, I'm the director of wildlife for the state's wildlife agency, and I have made it known that I want to go hunting. And I haven't had one person offer to take me. I said, so if it's hard for me to get into hunting, could you imagine what it's like for the general public that doesn't have access to, 150 staff people that might have that all have the tools to help anyway, even if they don't necessarily want to take the wildlife director out hunting on their personal time. So I said that, and actually George Smith, a former executive director of the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine, heard it, and at the end of the meeting, he was like, well, we're going to go deer hunting this fall. And I was like, oh no, what have I done?
From Judy's perspective, being a hunter is being a conservationist. But a big motivator is that it's a food source. Another motivator, climate change.
I mean, I do, as a biologist, believe in hunting as a wildlife management tool. So first and foremost, in particularly parts of the state where deer are overpopulated, I feel this obligation to do my part to try and help manage the deer population. But the more real side is that I love venison. And I wanted to be able to, harvest my own deer so that I could get myself some venison. I was vegetarian for 18 years or so. My stomach, basically, stopped processing soy. And so I made the decision that, okay, if you're going to have to eat more protein, I want to eat protein that's been locally sourced. It's not being treated with antibiotics or growth hormones. I know how the slaughter or that last step is, where you very often don't know in other scenarios. You've got no idea how that animal lived, how it was processed, how that experience is for that animal, what level of stress they've gone through. You don't know any of those things. So I wanted to try and do those things myself so I could sort of be in charge of it and make sure that it would happen the way that I would want it to happen.
Take responsibility for it.
Yeah, I want to take responsibility. Procure my own protein. I have a big veggie garden, so I grow a lot of my own vegetables, and so, at any rate, that's kind of how I got into it, was a desire. And I also didn't, when I read this article by this guy that I went to college with, actually, and, I just stumbled upon it on the internet somewhere, and he was talking about the things people could do to help combat climate change, and he listed, one of the things, and you'll see this often, but is, procure your food locally. So don't have vegetables that are being transported from South America or Florida up all winter and all that kind of stuff. But he said, hunting and fishing is one of the best things you can do to help, or one of the simplest things that people can do, a step everybody can make to source their food locally. So I was like, hey, I can do that. I can source my food locally, help fight climate change, do all these good things for the environment all at the same time.
With a mentor, George Smith, by her side, Judy took her first step afield, deer hunting.
That fall, I went out with him. We were deer hunting in the Mount Vernon area, and it was not at all what I expected. And it was so peaceful. And we'd just sort of walk around, and he would put me somewhere and say, okay, you just wait here. And he would go sit. I don't know where he went or what he did, but I would just sit there, and it was so peaceful. There's no cell phones, there's no email, there's no texts. You just sit there and basically watch wildlife or wait, listen, and sort of interact with your surroundings. We did that a few times that fall, and we never even saw a deer, but I left thinking, right, this is so calming, it's so relaxing. Why aren't more women doing this? We just don't know. We think, at least my vision of hunting was so different than what it actually was or what I had experienced. So I did that again a couple falls with him. It's also so much harder. It's like I just assumed it would be easier, right? I just assumed that, the deer, at least in southern Maine, are so populated that I figured it would be a lot easier than it was. But being in the same place at the same time with an animal where you have the opportunity to shoot it is actually quite rare.
Throughout the years, Judy dabbled in hunting different species with different mentors. In spring of 2019, Judy harvested her first turkey with fisheries biologist Liz Thorndike. Her name might sound familiar. I interviewed her for the very first episode of this podcast.
Liz Thorndike, a fisheries biologist, offered to take me out turkey hunting, and she's been turkey hunting since she was young in upstate New York. So we went to a property, actually game warden's property near where I live. We got there so early, I don't know, it was probably half hour, 45 minutes before sunrise. Then when we went out and got set up in the blind, and
the game warden whose property Judy was hunting on had a ground blind already set up for hunting with his young daughter. But this was no ordinary ground blind.
In the world of blinds, it was like the Cadillac of blinds. It was like this beautiful blind. There were chairs in it. The whole bottom was lined with like cedar shaving, so it smelled wonderful. It was so luxurious. And almost immediately, as soon as the sun started to come out a little bit, there we could hear a turkey off in the distance, and Liz was like, "Oh, there's a turkey," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I hear it." And so Liz is a great caller. She had a little mouth caller, and so she was kind of working the turkey, and it's calling, and she's calling, and the turkey's calling, and it's getting closer, and then we heard a female, not very far away, and Liz was like, "Oh no, if he has an actual female, he's not probably going to come to us." And I was like, oh, so disappointed. But she kept calling, and all of a sudden I'm like, no, he's coming. She's like, I think he's coming to the female. And I'm like, no, he's coming. He's close. He's close to us. He's getting closer. Mm-hmm. And you could hear him. He's getting like worked up, and you could hear him like they do this thing where they sort of bounce air off their feathers, like their wings, and you could hear him doing that. He's so clearly fired up and
like really excited.
Yeah, he's like jazzed. You can tell. He's like, I am looking good. Where's that lady? Liz had told me beforehand not to shoot if the bird was fanned out. Because sometimes what happens is the bullets will ricochet off of those feathers, almost form like an armor. So I'm like, okay. Wow. And if nothing else, I am a rule follower. So Liz tells me not to shoot if the bird's fanned out. So I'm keeping that in my head, and so we're listening and calling and listening and calling, and suddenly the bird walks, and he's probably like 10 feet away. He's in front, and he's strutting, he's all fanned out, and he's like turning, and I'm like, oh my god, he's so cute. And Liz was like, oh no, she's not going to shoot that bird if she thinks it's cute. And so she's like, go ahead and take the shot. And she's whispering, go ahead and take the shot. And I'm like, no, he's all fanned out. And she's like, it's okay. And I'm like, no. With Liz, she can't move, so she's literally not moving an inch. So I think she doesn't see that the bird is fanned out. And I'm like, no, you told me not to shoot if the bird was fanned out. And I'm like, he's still fanned out, Liz. I'm not gonna shoot. And she's like, it's okay. He's close enough. Take the shot. And so I'm like, oh, okay. I shot it, and I hit him in like exactly where you want to hit. He died immediately, fell to the ground, and I was so excited. I was like jumping up. I was screaming. We were hugging. I was crying. I just was like so overcome with all these emotions of.
Yeah, were you expecting that?
No, not at all. No. I didn't think I would be excited at all. In some ways, I was proud of myself for doing it, and in some ways, it was like a little overwhelming. Like I just had killed something, right? So that's overwhelming for somebody that doesn't, I've never done that before. So taking something else's life is serious for me. And then there was like this bond with Liz. I'm like, oh my God, she's so awesome. She worked so hard to help me and like get this all arranged and call the turkey in. And I was so impressed with all of her skills and her ability to call the turkey. And it was so interactive. And the whole morning was just so exciting. I was like overwhelmed with all these emotions. And I'm crying. And Liz is like so happy. She's like, this is the best hunt I've ever been on. She's like, it's so
Judy's mission as commissioner is to encourage women to go outside, not just hunting, but fishing, hiking, birding. Judy loves birding. I've actually never seen her without a pair of binoculars. She recognizes that women sometimes face barriers to participation, lack of gear, lack of time, lack of mentors, but she's trying to change all that. She wants to encourage women and newbies to get outside, regardless of the activity, but without a mentor, for many, this would be almost impossible.
So having women help women, I think, is really beneficial for getting people over those barriers and helping you figure out how to do things. And you can ask questions like, where are we going to pee? I'm probably not going to ask that question of a guy, right? I just would have held it until I was ready to explode. Yeah, I really do want, in my position, to try and connect with as many women as I can and just get them outside in general. I know a lot of people who, not even hunting, but they're just not even that comfortable being outside in the woods alone or hiking alone or even with friends. So, I mean, my goal is to just try and get more people excited about being outside and spending more time with nature.
Next week, I meet up with Dan Rice, an avid bass fisherman who aspires to be a registered Maine guide. To learn more about this series and for some hunting resources, visit mefishwildlife.com/changers. To stay up to date on current episodes, hit subscribe on your favorite listening app. If that happens to be the Apple Podcast app, give us a rating and let us know what you think.